Hi, the first in-person podcast recording, so welcome.
Feel privileged. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm excited to see you in person as well.
Yeah, it's been. I really enjoyed the first, like the others that we did, and yeah, it's good to kind of be in person to do one.
Well, yours is still to date the most listened to episode. So of course I'm happy to have you on again, and I have so many questions. The first one, which I'm excited to hear the answer to, because what is trauma, and then what can cause trauma?
So, this is a really, really complicated question. So I guess the easy way to explain it. So trauma is a subjective experience, and it's dependent upon, I guess, so there's two different types. So like there's developmental trauma, and then there's one-off trauma. So one-off trauma is, for example, a car accident. Developmental trauma is abuse. It's something that's sustained over a period of time. And I kind of specialise in developmental trauma, working with children, adolescents or adults, and it's about how we've adapted to not getting our specific needs met, whether that's emotional needs, whether that's physical needs, whether that's our basic needs like roof over your head, all of those kind of things. So we will basically adapt to how we connect with others. So intrinsically, so built into us, we have a need to connect. So if all of our needs are met or good enough, physical, emotional and basic needs, then kind of we will grow up to have a kind of secure base. If those needs are not met on a consistent level, then we will adapt to connection. So we will either go into people pleasing. So I need to make sure you're okay before I'm okay.
Oh, that's so common.
Yeah. Or moving away and I can do this on my own. So trusting others is very difficult. So if over a period of time, that will turn into developmental trauma. So for my own personal experience, from my own developmental trauma, I have complex Ptsd. So, and it wasn't until quite recently that I really kind of worked out how that kind of impacted me on a day-to-day basis. How it kind of impacted me in relationship, because that's where it shows up in relationship, do you know?
As a mirror.
Yeah, so I either, one or two things. If a situation becomes either around intimacy too intense or around potential conflict, I will either move towards or I'll move away. And social settings for me is when it really comes into play. Kind of mine's auditory, so sound. So that's kind of developmental trauma. And then one-off trauma is, if we have a car accident and we have an emotional reaction to that, it gets overcoupled or undercoupled. So overcoupling is if you look at us holistically, so you have sensations, you have image, you have behaviour, you have emotions, and you have a meaning to that.
Oh yeah.
So
sensations, image,
behaviour,
emotions, story.
And story, meaning.
Or meaning.
Story, meaning, same thing. So you go out for a meal, you get food poisoning.
Okay. I've actually had that before, it's not nice.
So Where did you have that?
At a Chinese.
Have you been to that Chinese again?
No.
And what did you have in that Chinese?
Sweet and sour chicken, egg fried rice.
And have you ever eaten that
chips.
again?
I have, but not
from
that
there.
Chinese.
Okay.
And
So-
I'm wary, so so before I eat it, whether it's from anywhere else, my conscious mind is it's bringing something up. Then I choose to then continue eating it anyway. So it is interesting
Yeah.
that actually.
Okay, so emotionally, so if you go from them 5 things, emotionally, how did you feel when you got food poisoning?
Emotionally, God, how do I put that physical feeling into emotion? Helpless.
Okay.
Because obviously you're vomiting
Yeah,
in all
yeah,
sorts
yeah.
of different areas.
So helpless and where are we going now with that?
Probably angry.
So okay,
as
angry
well.
and helpless.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you've got the behaviour part, which is the throwing up. Okay.
Mm.
Then you've got the image.
Oh yeah.
So you've got an image of it.
No one would want anyone to see me doing all of those. I mean, you can imagine both
Yeah.
ends.
So then you've got the image.
Let's be real.
And then, so the behaviour is the throwing up, and then you've got sensation, so the physical sensation
And
of
I
throwing
hate
up.
throwing up. It's
Yeah.
a fear of mine actually,
Yeah.
throwing up, because I can't breathe.
Yeah.
So it's
So-
more than just being sick
Yeah.
to
So
me.
yeah. So exactly. So what you've done is, like, if you think about getting 5 different pens and then squiggling them all up,
Yeah.
that's what's happened.
Yeah.
So you've got all of those 5 different things all welded together that gives you an experience or a traumatic experience of getting food poisoning in that Chinese, eating that food.
So it's not just the fact of I got food poisoning at Chinese, because what's coming to mind as well, the image thing, you know, because my past is caring so much what people think,
Yeah.
the image thing, obviously throwing up and all of that brought extra emotion of like shame,
Yeah.
embarrassment,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it
yeah.
goes like
Yeah.
so many layers
So it's
to it.
multi-layered, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And we'll get on to SE later on. And I'm just writing this down. Chinese experience. And we will look at that, how you would work with that, or how I would work with that. So that's the difference between developmental trauma and kind of a one-off traumatic event.
Would you say that everyone has trauma of some kind?
I would say everyone has, yeah, I would say so, yeah. I think it's very difficult for, you know, for us to have, especially growing up, because, you know, there will be different situations. You know, you might have fallen over at school and, you know, cut your knee. The teacher might have had a bad day and might have dealt with you in a way that you weren't expecting or what you wanted.
About this whole
Yeah.
needs getting met thing.
Yeah,
isn't
so like I delivered a workshop the other week on, I guess, identity
Oh wow.
and archetypes. So an archetype in its purest form is, well, it's pure. Do you know what I mean? And it's only when I say the word out loud that you will put your own experience on that word. For example, you know, an archetypal teacher is somebody that, you know, that would, you know, is kind, nurturing, compassionate, teaches you what you want to do in a very patient, all of these kind of things. I mentioned the word teacher to you, you're going to stick your narrative or your experience of a teacher onto that word, aren't you?
Yes, because our brain always likes to go back to compare of an experience we've had of the thing we're talking about.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So like we, you know, and we all have an archetypal even meaning of what childhood looks like. So it's, you know, cottage with, you know, white picket,
We're still recording.
white picket fences. Do you know what I mean? Like mum and a dad, brother, sister. It's idyllic. Everyone's lovely. You know, it's all kind of Peter and Jane kind of stuff, isn't it? But everyone's had a different experience to that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as children, you know, we might compare ourselves to somebody else, to our friends, to our peers, you know, to our neighbours, and, you know, something would have stuck. We would have had an experience that has stuck.
Like one of my clients hates Sundays.
Yeah.
And obviously it's because that she's got reasons to hate Sundays from her childhood. It wasn't a very nice day to her. I love Sundays.
Yeah.
So is it based purely on the experiences we've had?
Yeah. So it's exactly what I've just explained to you. So she would have had, you know, she's got a memory, an image of that.
Smells come into it. The smell of
She's
bleach
got
as well.
Yeah. So she's got, you know, that's the sensations, the sensory part of that. Then, you know, there will be an emotional part of that. There will be an image to that. So all of that, and it gets all overcoupled, and that's her experience of Sundays. Yeah.
Wow. So my next question is, and I think this is a great question if you're able to answer it. Say, and I think I actually know, but anyway, I'm going to shut up and ask the question. If two people experience the same experience, and one of them is severely traumatised and the other one it doesn't seem to affect, like, why is that? I'm sure there's many layers to it.
Yeah, it's complicated. So I guess it's your own subjective experience, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah,
you know, there's been loads of research done on twins, and it's a physical impossibility for the primary caregiver to give each twin exactly the same experience of life. So, dependent on what you've experienced up to that date would determine, one, how kind of your interpretation of what's happened, and two, how you dealt with that. So, you know, it depends, you know, what the incident is, and I know it doesn't really answer your question, but it's about our own subjective experiences. You know, we can have, you know, as I say, you know, you can ask 100 different people what their experience is, and they're watching exactly the same thing, and you will get 100 different experiences of that.
Yeah.
And that's called phenomenological experience.
I can't even try and
I know,
say
it's hard
that.
to say, yeah, especially on a Friday afternoon.
Phenomenological.
Yeah, phenomenological experience. And that means it's our own subjective experience of what is going on. And again, it you know, and it just depends on, you know, whether that trauma were you allowed to process that trauma? Is it processed, unprocessed? You know, has it been worked through, like from a physiological point of view?
Yes. You know, what's coming up for me is everyone knows my story. I was in an abusive relationship for 6 years where I was hit daily and all those things. When I left that, which is actually like an episode of Coronation Street, I'm not going to lie, I found the gym. Now, I didn't actually ever have until recently, and I'm still in therapy. I've never actually had therapy for that because I thought I'd processed it because I physically went crazy in the gym. I was called the machine because I had all this anger and like shame that was coming out, and I physically put it into gym stuff, but I never mentally and emotionally actually processed it. But I thought I had, just because I'd expressed my anger. But I'm sure, like, I can see you writing, there's a lot to go in there, and I'm still working through it in therapy now, and it surprises me what comes up, and I'm starting to talk, and then I'm like, these tears are still there, like, it's mad.
Yeah, because it's a physiological traumatic. Your body is physically holding on to it. So, you know, you can get triggers, you can get, you know, and I know that's like one of the questions about triggers, but you can, you know, you will experience like energy from the thought of just talking about something.
My heart races still sometimes.
There you go.
When I
so
talk.
That's your body going into fight, flight or freeze. So, do you know, we have a thing called a window of tolerance, and very, very basically, it's, you know, it's like a comfort zone. So, you know, if we have a healthy window of tolerance, do you know, autonomic nervous system will kind of go up and down as the day moves. Do you know, like it will be kind of at the bottom when you wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Then your system will get fired up and to physically move, and it will kind of go through peaks and troughs throughout the day. Dependent on your past and your experience of being, whether it's developmental trauma or whether it's being kind of constantly in a stressed out relationship or whether it's, work situation, your body gets flooded with cortisol, so you're constantly out of your window of tolerance. If you go above it, that is fight or flight. So your body can only really kind of manage that for a certain while. It's got a certain tolerance, do you know what I mean? So that's the sympathetic part of our autonomic nervous system where it goes up.
Yeah.
So it will only kind of be able to cope with that for a period of time. And then what happens then is the parasympathetic, the dorsal part of that, which is the collapse part, kicks in, and you just then go back down into freeze.
Are we either in one or the other? There's no in between. It's like one or the other, is it?
Yeah. So that's when it gets a little bit more complicated. So if you think about the sympathetic as the accelerator and the parasympathetic as the brake.
Oh.
So what happens is so for me, my foot was flat on the gas all the time, with my foot on the brake all the time. Unconsciously doing it. So if you think like you were talking about processing your trauma, you thought you processed your trauma in the gym.
Yeah.
So again, tell me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing that you had so much energy that you felt that you wanted to get rid of it in the gym.
Oh, that's what I was, an absolute machine. Yeah. It wasn't normal.
So that's your parasympathetic up.
Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, and then where was the break part of that?
There was none, which is why I fell into probably more eating disorders, because it was go, do, not good enough, high achiever, need to prove myself.
And even that, where you're doing that, aren't you? Your sympathetic nervous system is kicking in, because you're going up and up and up and up and up and up and up.
And I lived like that for years.
So like from my point of view, it was like I wake up 5 o'clock in the morning, loads of energy, need to go to the gym, always do something early in the morning. And then people will say to me, oh, you look really chilled out. Whereas internally, the way that I would describe it is that inside I've got I had a tube that's got running water firing through it, morning, like really, really, really quickly. That's the energy part, like that. And I'm having to squeeze it as hard as I can to stop the water coming out of it.
Wow.
So that's the foot on the brake all the time. So I'm like, it's like the fear of what's going to happen if all this comes out.
Ah, so
you were like,
you were suppressing what you felt.
Yeah. Because I just had all this energy, and then when I sat down, when it got to the end of the day, I would just sit on the settee and then and literally pass out. Go to bed and then start it again. So it's about, and then when people are in freeze or they dissociate or they disconnect or zone out, for want of a better word, that's the freeze part. Someone's got low mood, someone's got depression, all of these things are in freeze. That's when you're in freeze. And you can kind of experience it, like you can go in and out of it. Do you know, like you'll have days when anything that's offered too much, too soon, too quick will trigger a trauma. Anything that you're doing in life, if it's too much, too soon, too quick, that will trigger the trauma. So then that will fire you out of your window of tolerance. So then it's about, okay, so the fear, so with a lot of people that are depressed, and you go, oh, just go for a walk, or just do this, or just do that. It's not a cognitive thing, it's a physiological thing, because the fear is to come out of freeze, I need to go to fight or flight.
Oh God.
So like the thought of going back up there again, where it was overwhelming, he's like, do you know what?
I'd rather
Soft out, I'm
stay.
going to stay down here. Like duvet back over the head.
That's so interesting, because that leads me to our comfort zone being trauma. So when I was in this relationship, so it's a great example to use. At the beginning, obviously it was like, what the fuck, this isn't happening. It was like a big deal. I did learn to disassociate, so I could literally leave my body, experience the physical trauma, but I wasn't there. I just like switched off. But then it became normal. So although I had a lot of fear, it was just like, well, yeah, he hits me. It was just like a normal thing. And it wasn't until I was out of it and I was like, holy shit. That was not normal.
Because it's the fear, like, to come out of freeze or to come out of that situation, it's the fear of mobilising. So the fear of coming out of it is like...
so overwhelming.
So it just kind of rises up, and so then I'll talk about the SE bit later, but that's when that comes in. It's about noticing. So for me as a therapist, what am I offering? Is it too much or not enough? So again, like, it needs to be enough to kind of to raise, but not too much to overwhelm. So ideally, if you think about the window of tolerance like that, we need to be leaning up against the edge. So it needs to be uncomfortable without going into overwhelm.
I bet that. How do you do that as a therapist?
By fucking it up a few times. Do you know what I mean? Because like, I was encouraged to, and this is where there's my self-awareness and, not being perfect, and relationships are not perfect, human beings are not perfect, etc, etc, etc. Encouraged is language, not mine, to fuck it up at least twice in every session. So maybe offer something that gets knocked back, or do something and then actually that was a bit clumsy, I could have done that better. Do you know what I mean? So then, because that is healthy. It's healthy to make mistakes. It's healthy to be able to sometimes be a bit uncomfortable, to be clumsy, to be, and it's all about, kind of encouraging that. Yeah, this is going to be uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean?
It's got to be able to create change.
Exactly. And that's, and that's it. And it's, but how are we going to manage this in such a way where it doesn't overwhelm? And that really is through the quality of the relationship. Do you know what I mean? So it's about, do you know what? I've got you, and I'm here, and I'll do it with you. I will be right by your side, in a really compassionate way where it doesn't overwhelm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let's talk. This isn't one of my questions, but I can't not ask this whilst we're in this conversation of feeling and emotions. As humans, and I've experienced this myself many times, why are we so scared to feel? When if we think about it, the worst thing that can ever happen to us is we feel an emotion. But why are we so scared of because I've experienced, by making myself feel with compassion and holding space for myself, the fear of feeling the emotion is worse than actually just sitting and being like, I feel deeply sad right now and feeling it. But why are we so scared to do that? Because
when we are born, we have two emotions. We have good emotions, and then the bad is annihilation. It's death.
To the child.
Because that's where so when we are born with that innate ability for survival. So therefore the bad feeling needs to be so bad that, because, if a baby didn't scream like it was going to be annihilated, you wouldn't feed it, would you?
That's so true.
Do you know what I mean? So if that annihilation is not soothed soothed in a way that's good enough, or when we express emotions of being sad, being angry, all of these feelings which are looked at as negative. Do you know what I mean? If our parents don't have the capacity to be able to regulate themselves and to be able to contain our big feelings, then we will grow. There will be an element of shame to it, or I'm not acceptable if I'm angry. I'm not acceptable if I'm sad. So therefore, I don't get to process, or I don't get to sit with. So
and
like, and a lot of people, do you know, like a lot of, you know, some of the workshops that that I've done around, you know, how are you with sitting with somebody in pain and just sitting there?
I want to try and fix it.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, somebody said to me the other day, it was a great, like, these were foster parents, and they went, is it okay to hug a foster child? And I was like, great question. I went, who's the hug for?
Oh.
And she looked at me like that, and she went, what do you mean by that? I said, well, who's the hug for? I said, is it to make you feel better?
Wow.
Or is it for the child? Because if you're anxious because you've got a child that's sitting there in pain and you want to go and hug them, is it to soothe your own anxiety?
Wow.
And she was like, wow.
Like me, like, wow, that is so true, you know. Does it help someone, like, because I was taught and I've learnt now that crying is absolutely so healing and necessary. We all hear it. Oh, don't cry. There's no need to cry. Big girls don't cry. But actually, we need to cry. It's not a bad thing, is it?
Because another, again, we become conditioned, don't we? Do you know what I mean? About, you know, I'm only acceptable if I behave in a certain way, or I'm sitting there with a smile on my face. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's about, for me, like, you know, I'm in the middle of, like, at the moment, I'm developing some workshops that I'm going to kind of start to roll out. And they're kind of therapeutic workshops, but they're for parents. They're not kind of for
so they for the caregiver, like, so for the person that's not experiencing the trauma, but they're helping someone through the trauma.
Yes and no, because, you know, a lot of the time, you know, I think especially when it's developmental, and this is very, you know, it's delicate, really delicate. It's about having compassion to go, okay, so this has been your experience, but how are you processing? How are you managing yourself in that? Because you've got, like, little Johnny or Sally that's really anxious. How do you feel in that situation?
Yeah.
You know, are you managing your child through your own anxiety? So don't touch that. Is that in the child's best interest, or because your anxiety is going through the roof?
Well, let me get this right in therapy terms. Our perception is our projection, unless we're consciously aware of that, isn't it?
Yeah. And so, like, the workshops, what I do is, like, I split it into two halves and go, okay, so we're going to pick a title today. You know, let's pick nurturing. What is your experience of nurture? As soon as I say that to you, how were you nurtured? How do you nurture? And, you know, and we will get in the group, get them to like process that and to be able to reflect on that. And what I want is for them to give me their experience. I don't want to give me the dictionary like word for what nurture is. I want them to give me their experience. So, you know, my experience of it was like, you know, fend for yourself, you know, and like, keep out of the way, don't make any noise, don't make any mess, do you know what I mean? Keep your gob shut. And
that was nurture to you.
Yeah, and that was nurture to me. So, like, so then, you know, and then I've gone from that situation into a boarding school where, like, there was zero. So, so then that will have, or would have had, some kind of impact on how, you know, how I parented my older children. Do you know what I mean? So if I can then reflect on what nurture means to me, and like, and the second workshop with that is the other half of that, which is boundaries, you know, half nurture, half boundaries. So then you get to work out, okay, so how do I manage me? How do I do me? Do you know what I mean? For me to then park me and be present for my child. Yeah,
because that's why we have so many patterns to break, because we just pass it down to our children because we don't know any better.
Yeah, and it's not saying I want you to disregard how you're feeling, but in that moment, your child needs you to be present for it. So then be present for your child and be able to contain your child's, big emotions, for them to be able to process those big emotions, for you to be able to co-regulate, soothe, or help that child soothe that. And then afterwards, when they are kind of happy playing, for you then to be able to go and process your own stuff. Do you know what I mean? So what was that about? What was getting triggered in me there?
Yeah. What's the trigger? That's one of my questions, and you brought that up.
So I guess for me, it's about what throws you out your window of tolerance.
Yeah.
Is it unprocessed trauma? Is it kind of one of our introjects from our childhood, like I don't know, children should be seen or not heard, or
like a conditioning kind of thing,
like,
or a
so
trauma response.
so like don't speak at the table, don't eat with your mouth full. Do you know? Is it something like that? And you're trying to kind of project that onto whatever the situation is. So like I had a really interesting situation yesterday with a client, and it was like, so come in with like, and like so and so's done this, so and so's done that, 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 and I'm like, okay. I'm like, so who's the common denominator in all of this? Do you know what I mean? Like, all these people have pissed you off, right? But you was there for every part of it. So what is it about these situations that's triggering you? And he was like, and I'm like, okay. So like, let's really boil it down. Do you know what I mean? And the common denominator in all of them was around not being seen, not being heard, not being understood.
Yeah. Which triggered, was it like an anger mask? Because I want to go
Why
into
are you not listening to me? I'm telling you, this is how you do it. Do you know what I mean? So then it was like, okay. So then the trigger is like whenever he's not, seen, heard, understood, listened to, or any of that. That's his trigger. So then it's about, okay, so being able to first of all notice that.
Yeah, awareness.
So we were looking at, I do a big thing like around impulses and that kind of stuff, which is, which is great, because that you can transfer that to anything. Do you know what I mean? You can transfer that to kind of any kind of addiction, or you can or any kind of behaviour. Do you know, if you have the impulse to do something. Yeah, and you're aware of the impulse. Yeah. Can you then just make a conscious choice to do something different? How long can you sit with the uncomfortable?
Oh, we don't like that, do we?
Do you know what I mean? How long? So like, like a little kind of, if anyone listens to this, like a little kind of
driving's always a good
challenge.
Example.
Yeah, if you've got an itchy head.
Oh, yeah.
How long can you...
I practice this. I'm quite good at this now. Ignoring it.
Yeah, how can you... Not ignoring it. Noticing it.
Oh, no, I try and ignore it.
Yeah.
That's
so
just disassociation, isn't it?
So notice it. Notice where the discomfort comes from. Notice if there's any kind of... What comes up around that? Is there any kind of irritability, any frustration, any annoyance, any kind of like... Or
just want to scratch it.
Yeah. So, next time, you get the impulse to pick your phone up.
Oh, that's a good one.
Notice it.
Yes.
And just like, okay.
There's the impulse.
Yeah.
It's not making me act. I choose whether to act or not.
But for me, it's about how do you know that?
Exactly. This is what one of the questions was. How do we know if we have trauma? Because we live it out and we don't realise sometimes.
And again, do you know, that is... I guess for me...
I don't think I could answer this.
I guess for me, so we were talking about window of tolerance. So, like, say, that's a healthy window of tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
If you start to control your environment, or you start to spend a lot of your time outside of that window of tolerance and avoiding or not going anywhere near any of those things, right? So therefore your window of tolerance becomes really narrow, and you will meet people, or even yourselves, oh no, I can't do that because of that. Oh no, I can't do. Oh no.
Like body image.
Yeah, or whatever, and what happens is it just kind of seeps out, like, into every kind of aspects of your life. So the way that I would kind of like have a fair idea is when the little things start to piss you off, and when the little things have a real impact on you.
Like being late or traffic or something.
Even smaller than that.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? If the small things start to that's really irritating me. What is that about? Do you know? Or becoming really frustrated with everyone around you. Do you know what I mean? Or, just when the little things become really big, that for me is a sign that somebody's window of tolerance has really shrunk and they're living their world like in overwhelm.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That's so key.
Yeah. So constantly overwhelmed. And the trouble is, when we're outside of our zone of window of tolerance, we become hypersensitive to our environment.
So are we then in like chronic stress?
So then everything is like, oh, no, can't, no, that, no. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and also what we lose the ability to do is to be able to trust the brake. So like the parasympathetic, part of that natural braking system is social engagement. So when we feel, for example, I come up behind you with a balloon and pop it.
Yeah, it's not going to be very nice.
You're going to go up, aren't you?
Yeah.
Your sympathetic system's going to go up.
Yeah.
So then your body is ready, isn't it? It's ready
to do something.
That's the threat response, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's a threat. Right, my body's like, it needs to get ready. There's a lion just about to eat me. Then you turn around and see my silly face grinning at you. So then your social engagement, that's the social engagement part kicking in. So it's like a risk assessment. So then it will look around for risk, and then the social engagement part is like, look at that. Do you know what I mean? So then your system starts to soothe and come back down. Problem is when you're out there all the time, that gets warped. So especially around developmental trauma and stuff like that, like you hear it all the time. What are you looking at?
Yeah, because they're so paranoid, but they genuinely think something.
It's not the paranoia. It's their social engagement is warped. So every every facial movement, or even just eye contact, would even trigger that, because they're so hypersensitive. Do you know what I mean, to their environment? Find it really hard to read. A compassionate face, or be able to soothe themselves through that.
Yeah. So that's not a case of obviously just mindset your way through it, because their reality is.
Yeah.
So how would, because this I guess this links. I need to keep doing that in case it goes off. This kind of links to one of my questions from one of my clients. Actually, she says, "How do we release trauma that is stored in the body? I feel my autoimmune disease is in part from childhood trauma." So how does someone release all of that?
With a professional.
Yeah.
So that has to be done in relationship.
Okay, so it's not someone who was like, oh, I'm good at this personal development stuff, I'm going to go ahead and do it myself.
It's very, very, very difficult, especially if it is there's a lot of trauma attached to it. And, what was the question?
Autoimmune disease. So
so if you've got, with a professional, with a somatic experience practitioner, do you know what I mean? And really slowly.
How could that? So those that are listening that don't understand how So my client said, how do we release trauma stored in the body? Then she's linked it up to, because she's done a lot of inner work herself, to the physical manifestation of autoimmune disease. So how does emotional trauma then manifest in physical disease?
So so it is, isn't it? It's dis-ease turns to disease.
Yeah.
So without knowing specifics, do you know what I mean? You know, even, you know, the first 12 weeks of when a child is conceived.
Oh.
Yes, as early as that. There is one of the what is it? Startle. The Startle Response. So if in the embryo, if that when the embryo is like, if the parent is like say mum is like really stressed, so like she's flooding the embryo or the baby with cortisol, what the baby will try to do is move away from it.
Wow.
Like that. So therefore, if it's constant, the baby will be like that, in a constant state of kind of startle response. Because
it doesn't want that.
Doesn't want
or
that.
Need it.
No, so natural is that. Move away, come back. Move away, come back.
Oh my God, that's so in the womb it even begins in the womb.
Yeah. So and then from that, the other kind of like responses are formed. So if that one's stuck from the beginning, all the rest are going to be kind of frozen when they come out.
Yeah.
And you like a lot of that trauma is stored in the hips. You think like that,
tense
and then
and
the
tightness,
back, tense
lower
and
back.
tightness, lower back.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of kind of really early developmental kind of research in it, and you know. Again, you know, if that part of when that child is born, again, if that child has not been taught how to soothe, that child is constantly in fight or flight. So, and it manifests in loads of ways. There's loads of research in there saying, you know, about psychosomatic kind of illnesses, and the body kind of holding on to trauma. I mean, even with regards to, like I picked up a calf injury 2 weeks ago, and I'd had a really tough couple of weeks. Didn't think anything of it, warmed up properly, went out for a couple of mile run, did some heel repeats, and my calf went.
How interesting.
And I was kind of reflecting on it and thinking, just being curious about it, thinking, so my system would have been overloaded.
Wow.
So then so me, the weakest part of my body at that time, that calf, because my system was already like, you can't take any more of that, then puts additional stress, then I put additional stress on it. And then that's the first place that kind of broke down.
When I was in my eating disorder and at the gym and lean and looking incredible but so unhappy internally, I was injured all the time.
So there you go, So
that makes so much sense. And also in terms of menstrual cycle, obviously being a woman, even now, I've noticed, reflecting back on each cycle's different. If energetically, emotionally, I'm holding on to something that I'm not maybe working through, my period is more painful and longer and heavier. When I'm emotionally fine, I'm really in flow and release, it's hardly like I've had a period at all, and that is so interesting to see in the physical body.
Especially where it's held in the hips and in sexual organs all around there, so it's all around this kind of middle part around your hips.
That's so oh God, there's so much. It's so I just love all of this so much. Right, the next one I'd like to go into is I want to ask about somatic experience, but let me just finish with the trauma questions first. How do we unconsciously manifest experiences, people, places, things into our reality that almost like keeps us in that safe zone of trauma? And why do we do that unconsciously, obviously, because we don't want it consciously.
So yeah, unconsciously, it's around safety, isn't it? So safety is a subjective experience.
Yeah.
So for example, do you know, when I work with kids that are in care, that have gone into foster care, you know, if they've had a particularly chaotic life background, you know, and then they go into you know, I say this all the time, like, and then they go into somebody, you know, into care, into foster care, and I go, even, you know, your house is not a safe place for them, because, you know, it's a subjective experience. It's a constant reminder of everything that they've never had, isn't it?
Oh God! So if you create a safe, in quotes, to us, loving space, the child can see that as like not safe.
Because too much, too soon, too quick, and everything that I kind of talk about, you know, you know, and the questions that you've got, you can relate near enough everything back to too much, too soon, too quick, because you know, and it's so therefore, you know, it's like, the word is to titrate, so it's like, it's drip feeding it in. It's tiny bits. Do you know what I mean?
Even love.
Yeah, because again, do you know, it's like, you know, so for me, growing up, everything, it was all conditional. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was only accepted if I behaved in a certain way.
Yeah.
So therefore, for me, all relationships, I found it hard to trust, because it was like,
I've got to do.
I get a bit confused, because I don't know how to behave here. Do you know what I mean? Like, so what do you want from me? Do you know what I mean? So therefore, already I go into freeze. I'm like, well, you know what I mean? What do you want? How would you like me to behave?
Because you couldn't just accept or understand how someone can just love you just for being you.
Yeah. So then when I was shown it, it was like, whoa. Too much, just like flooded.
Even the good stuff, what we say we all want, that is just so interesting. So a lot of my clients I work through they have self-worth. I don't want to say issues, they have lack of self-worth, meaning they say they want all these things, but then if they receive them, they're like, I can't cope with all this love and receiving everything I want. And it's the conscious mind's like, what? But I've experienced that. To receive, like my relationship, sometimes I literally cry. I don't know what the tears are. Like, I can't believe I'm in this loving relationship and I have tears now. He loves me for just me, and I'm like, but I don't have to do anything, and I don't get it sometimes.
And that's the conditioning, isn't it? That's the conditioning, isn't it? It's like, okay, so what do you want from me? What have I got to do? A dance for you, or what?
I can't feel safe and relaxing to. He loves me just for being, which I am learning to. Yeah. But it's hard, even though it's amazing. It's too much sometimes. Yeah. That's mad. How do we work through that? Because ultimately we can, and I'm taking 2 years so far to work through that. Yeah. And it's getting slowly better.
Slowly, like I've been in a relationship for. She's going to kill me if she watches this. I think it's 7 years this year. 7 years in June. Is that right?
You can let him know, can't you?
And I find it really, like even now, do you know what I mean? It's like I still have days, do you know, like where this feels really uncomfortable.
Because it's so good.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Do you think we can ever be trauma free if we continue to work on all of these things?
So no is the answer to that question, but I think that with our self-awareness we will catch it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, we're human beings, aren't we?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and you know, if you've not had that's why I like to look at everything holistically. You've had a bad night's sleep, you've not ate well, do you know what I mean? Like,
you're
tired, what
you're due on your menstrual cycle, which is me, so I have like PMS now.
Yeah, and then, you know, come on, let me give you a hug, and you're like, whoa, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, so I think, you know, on a good day, do you know what I mean? I think we will be able to be amazing.
Yeah. It's like too good to be true sometimes, but like my affirmation for a while has been, life gets to be this good. Because my thing was, I always needed to struggle unconsciously. I needed to struggle at something. So everything else could be good, but something I needed to be struggling at. And then when I didn't have to struggle at anything, I was like, whoa, this doesn't feel safe because I'm not struggling at anything.
Exactly. So you've not got...
I created an experience to therefore then struggle.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think, you know, our brains are designed to keep us safe, do you know what I mean? And I think, you know, we will always look for, you know, problems in it, do you know what I mean? Because it's like, well, you know, something's got to happen.
But then we say we don't want problems. Isn't it funny just to get to know ourselves better and deeper? And there's so many freaking layers. Like when I first started this, when I had you on a podcast, I hadn't been doing this for very long, and I had like so much to work through, and still do, always will. But now I love the process of peeling back layers. But at one point, because I was a perfectionist, I was like, I want to have a tick on my personal development thing. I just want to be done with trauma work. You're never done. No. As a human.
No, you're not. And do you know, like, you know, and I meet people like that all the time. Can we just get this over and done with?
Yes, and can I be healed now, please?
And it's like, so, yeah, this is going to really piss you off because we're going to do exactly the opposite of that. Do you know what I mean? And we're going to really, really slow it down. You know, like, so people, they come to me and they want to tell me their story, like, just get it out of the way. Let me talk really quickly so we can get out of the way so then I haven't got to feel anything.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like, actually, so we forget the narrative.
Yeah.
And we just work with, you know, what's happening to you right now. What's your experience of being sat here with me now?
Yeah.
And, you know, and that alone can take ages to be able to, you know, for somebody, you know, you must, you know, there's people, you know, you must meet people that very cognitive, aren't they? Just like,
they're so, and I say, don't think, feel, don't think it, feel it, and they're like, what does that even mean?
Exactly.
Because they're so up here.
And that question is like, really? You know,
and they get annoyed.
Exactly.
Which is, I'm like, I'm glad that you're pissed off right now. Then they get even more pissed off because I'm acknowledging that they're pissed off.
So then again, that's like, so you might have to stay there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? For a bit. Do you know what I mean? And then, okay, so where else can we go with this? Can we go to image? So when you think, you know, when you're thinking of that, what comes up for you? Can we go into a tiny bit of sensation? So when you're pissed off, how do you know that?
Yes. Physically.
Yeah.
Physiologically.
How do you know you're pissed off? Well, I'm just fucking pissed off, aren't I? But how? How do you know that?
And get them into the body a bit more.
But again, for somebody, especially like somebody that might have been sexually abused, you got that's, you know, that's
hard. They don't want to go into the body. They don't want to go
because their body, or somebody that's ill, somebody that's got maybe, you know, some kind of disease, like their container, their body isn't safe. So like, you know, it's about, you know, being able to kind of go round, or, you know, and work in a way that again is manageable.
Yeah. So window of tolerance, but not outside of it, but to the edge of it.
Yeah.
I have two random questions that aren't on there. One for my mum specifically, really. She struggles to remember anything. Is that from trauma or just physical, how her brain's not maybe nourished? Like, you know, in chat, she can't remember anything. And I think that's really it's not good or bad, but I think it's unusual. She really, like even my childhood. Short term she's fine. But you know, like her childhood and even me growing up, yesterday she was like, I feel so sad because I can't remember all the things that I'm like, oh mum, remember when I was 7? And she's like, I can't remember.
Yeah. So, you know, our brains are marvellous, aren't they? Do you know, if there's any kind of really uncomfortable experience that have happened, sometimes our brain will disassociate from, like, pull away from the feeling or the sensation. Do you know what I mean?
To try and protect
us and like block it out. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And then another one which is linked to this, and I kind of do know what you're going to say, but this person needs to hear your answer too. How do you help someone that doesn't want to be helped?
You can't.
You can't.
You can't. All you can do is offer to be there and model.
Oh, yes.
You know,
be the lighthouse.
Healthy, whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? Model what a healthy version of that looks like. And it's hard. It's really, really tough, especially if that person is really close or a loved one. It's really hard. It's like all you can do is as I say, model what a healthy relationship looks like and go, do you know what? I'm here. Do you know what I mean?
And there is nothing. It's like when I was on her exit, my mum took me to counselling. I sat there the whole time like this, and I did this and this, and the whole time I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to. And obviously my mum's desperately trying to get me help, and I didn't want help. Eventually I did, which is why I'm still alive, actually. But that must be so hard.
Yeah, it is. And do you know what? Especially when I work with children and adolescents, I will do an initial consultation with parents, child. The most important thing that I ask them is, you need to be here.
The child.
You've got to want to be here. We need to get on, because otherwise it won't work.
Yeah.
And it's your choice. And I say that in front of mum and dad. This is not your choice.
No. No matter how much they want it.
Yeah, and this is your choice to the child or the adolescent.
But that empowers them a lot.
Yeah.
Because I bet they've never been spoken to like that, giving them the responsibility for their own lives.
Yeah, so I did a consultation on Monday with mum and son, and he was like, yeah. And I'm like, don't tell me now. I don't want to know now. Do you know what I mean? Because what I want you to do is I want you to go home, and I want you to tell mum the reasons why you want to work with me.
Wow.
And then I want you to make that decision.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Because then you're going to make progress together, aren't you?
Yeah.
Other than just showing up because their mum
It's not going to work. If you're sent to therapy, it will not work.
No.
Will not work. You've got to want it. There's got to be something inside of you that wants to heal.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And wants change. Because otherwise, you're just trying to put a square peg through a round hole, do you know what I mean? It's not going to work.
Yeah. One of my ex-clients says she goes between thinking I need therapy and then thinking I need coaching. How do you know what you need?
Okay.
Because obviously there is a difference.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I guess, I reckon I would say it's around goals, isn't it? So, what do you want to achieve out of coaching? And what do you want to achieve out of therapy?
Good point. To get some clarity to start with.
Yeah. So, is it a psychological goal? Is it an emotional goal? If, for example, you have a goal of, think of an example.
Running the marathon?
So say you want to run a marathon as a goal, and you want to be coached to do that. I don't like the word, about, self-destructing and things like that. But because for me, that's about too much too soon, too quick again. Do you know what I mean? It's about, working at a pace or working within, up against the edge of that window of tolerance. So is it, what stops you? What gets in the way?
Yeah, the blocks.
Yeah. What is, is it a mentality thing?
Like just a simple mindset shift?
Or, or is there something more than that?
Yeah, something deeper. That's so key, because you've got neuroplasticity, which is all about, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only studied this in my own study. That's about the physical brain rewiring thought processes, which therefore then creates different feelings, then you can take the action, blah, blah, blah. But when you understand all of that, and you, for instance, you don't feel worthy of receiving what you say you want, is that when therapy would come into
absolutely.
play?
Do you know, like, as I say, you can try to change somebody's mindset, But if they are holding on to trauma,
it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
You'll get probably so far, and it's just like a plaster, isn't it?
Other
than digging in the wound.
And that's exactly what I call it. Do you know what I mean? It is. It's like sticking a plaster over an open wound. It's, you can.
Yeah.
You can change somebody. You can change somebody's behaviour, but that will only last for so long. Do you know what I mean? Until the underlying trauma comes back up again.
So that I just want to give my own experience in terms of body image. When I first started body image work, I pretended that I liked my mindset. I had so much masculine power. I mindseted my way through. I'm fine. I love myself as I am, and it lasted so long. And then I went right back to the beginning again because I hadn't healed all the trauma around my body image. So now I sit here, I mean, I don't exactly have roles, but compared to my 9% body, like I am so happy in I don't care what I look like, and I really don't care. I'm not pretending, I have up and down days, but I've done a lot of releasing and really deep digging, which was so hard. Why did that even matter to me? And all of the childhood stuff came up. Yeah,
because it's again conditioning, isn't it? You know what I mean? I'm only acceptable if I'm a certain way, or it's around. It's about regulation, isn't it? Soothing.
And being kind to yourself. Yeah. And allowing yourself to feel the rejection and the shame. Yeah. And it's also everywhere you look. It's almost reminding me that, you should go back to how you were, because look, it is shameful to have a fat body, it is shameful, but then having to reject all of that consciously over and over again, that's hard. And this is why many of my clients struggle with body image specifically, because it's not just a healing process, it's for the rest of your life. You've got to consciously keep choosing what you've released and what you've worked through, because everyone's trying to tell you differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, and you think about, we were talking about kind of triggers and things like that earlier on, so if that stuff is constantly getting triggered from your childhood, your system is constantly overwhelmed. It's being activated all the time, isn't it?
Putting a bikini on for me used to be an actual freak the fuck out moment. It's literally felt like life or death when someone like my fiance, who didn't experience any of that trauma, who was trying to be supportive at the time, would just go, who cares? It's no big deal. But in the time for me, it was a massive deal because of my experience.
Because he's communicating to you in a cognitive way.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter, does it? But actually, physiological, your system has been triggered, hasn't it? So do you know what I mean? So it's it's activated. So it's in fight or flight. Yeah. So therefore, because that's the reptilian part of our brain, it needs to be soothed from the bottom upwards.
And then you can make a conscious choice.
Yeah, because that part's gone offline, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
So which is a prefrontal cortex?
That's that bit there. That's the thinking. That's the thinking, rational side. Right. So if you've got activated, you're in fight flight. So your activation is okay. So
body image, if you can.
So body image. So body image. Okay. Yeah. So that's an activation. Yeah. Just the thought of it, you're getting activated.
Yeah.
Okay. So then once your system goes into fight or flight, as a self-protection, it's like, how do I soothe this? Yeah. How do I regulate myself? Yeah. So then is that from, and that's where like kind of the eating disorder comes in. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
to try and protect yourself from feeling.
But it's soothing it, isn't it? It's soothing it. It's almost like, if you think about it as the activation, like kind of lava, whatever you're doing is soothing. It's putting it out, isn't it? Because it's too hot. So it's like,
even dieting and trying to get control back, although it's not going to work long term, short term it relieves anxiety because you feel at least you're controlling something. Yeah. But actually that's all superficial stuff, which is why I'm not a licensed therapist at all. I've done a lot of work and study around this, but they need to work with a professional to really get to the root.
Absolutely, because the anxiety is the activation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So therefore what's going on is like all you're doing is just like pushing it down a little bit,
and then just doing life again for a bit until it happens again.
Yeah, and then, but then it's going, okay, so, and like, so, I want to get down to 10 stone. Okay, so how does that heal you?
Thank you. I was thinking, please don't let it go a different way. That's like with diet culture, exactly
So
that.
how does that heal? So how do you then soothe the trauma or soothe the activation once you reach that weight?
Because it's never going to go away unless you go to the root cause of it.
Yeah. So like that, the dieting is the sticking plaster.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Which makes us feel better temporarily.
Yeah.
And most women live their life putting the plaster on, taking it off, putting it on, and then what they really need to do is get into the fucking wound. It's going to hurt. Yeah.
So when I if I work with somebody that's got an eating disorder, I won't even mention it. Won't even mention that. Won't mention food. Won't, like, apart from a safeguarding thing. Do you know what I mean? Around just their general welfare.
Yeah.
But I won't mention it.
It's not about the food.
Because it's not about the food. It's got nothing. Yeah, it's got nothing to do with the food.
So
and
true.
And the more you mention it, the more activated they get. I worked with a girl not so long back, 19, something like that, and understandably, it's all her mum talked about.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Was she not eating, or was she eating too much in bin?
Not enough.
Not enough.
So dieting. And training, and a personal trainer, and dieting, and and it was like, she'd come and see me and she'd like, oh, thank God for that. I know I haven't got to think about or talk about food for 15 minutes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It just keeps perpetuating the cycle.
Yeah, it is. That's all it's doing. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, because, as I say, it's just, that's the plaster.
Yeah.
We need to look at what's underneath it. Yeah. How to soothe the system.
That is,
how to regulate the system.
Which I'd like to go into. We're checking the time, so you've got to leave in 20 minutes. So somatic, is that how you say it? Somatic experiencing. So tell us what that is and how that helps, and why you need a professional to help you go through that.
So somatic experience is I guess it works along the premise of we are mammals. Okay, so if you look at animals in the wild, we have a similar nervous system to them. Okay, so again, window of tolerance, you've got fight, flight, freeze.
Is there another one called dawn? Or is that kind of like made up inside in the book? So I've heard recently there's an extra one, fawn response. Yeah. And I don't know what you think about this, but you've got fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and apparently, I don't know how true this is, fawn is the one where you people please, so you become like codependent to feel safe.
Oh, right, okay.
I don't know whether that's just an additional thing.
That's a behaviour, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, that's true.
So this is like, you would, and it's about instinctively, when we're born, we have this system that keeps us alive. So, it comes from the reptilian part, goes right through our systems, and it's connected through our brainstem to the reptilian part of our brain.
Is that the oldest part of our brain?
So that's the part there's never changed. Okay.
Is that with, sorry to interrupt, but I think this is also key for my listeners, is that the part of your brain where all your body cares about is survival? So in terms of food, if you restrict food, your reptile brain doesn't know there's Tesco down the road. Exactly. It's like, there's no food, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to protect you from that. Yeah. And that never changes. Just to clarify, you're not going to ever overpower that part of the brain. Yeah.
So it's around, when we get activated, it's a threat response. Yeah. Okay. So our body thinks we are at threat. So when we were, first on the planet, there was a real risk of being attacked or being eaten.
Like literally dying.
Yeah. So that's where it was from. Over the thousands of years, etc., it's like we've evolved. So
I want to say some of us have, but that was a poor joke.
So we've evolved. So what somatic experience does is, so it works with the sympathetic, which is fight, flight, and the parasympathetic, which is freeze. And so it's a physiological thing. So it's about regulating your system. So it's about, understanding your system, being able to regulate your system, because 99% of the things that people would come to me with in therapy, if your system's regulated, those that you wouldn't be coming to me with the things that you're coming with.
Because you'll be able to cope with life.
Yeah, exactly. So you will be able to make, because you're, the logical, rational part of your brain is online, you will be able to make better choices. You're not making choices based on emotion.
So would you say that's a difference between reacting and responding?
Absolutely. So reacting is a trauma response.
Yeah.
Is how you would it's how you.
It's like
that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And whereas if your system is regulated and the front part of your brain is online, you are responding to something.
That makes so much sense, because when I have body image traumas, which isn't that much anymore, I can so easily, I sit in front of the mirror, usually naked, because it just helps me connect with, I'm facing my biggest fear then as well.
Yeah.
But I speak to myself out loud and I'm like, it's okay, sweetheart. And sounds a bit weird, but it works. Just breathe and be with myself and talk to myself like I would talk to someone who I love very much. And that for me, through practice, just really grounds me again. And I'm like, okay, so now what happened? What can I learn from this? Who do I choose to be now? What am I going to do?
Yeah. So for me, initially it's about sourcing a resource. Okay, so again, using social engagement is about initially like grounding yourself, having your feet on the floor, feeling your sit bones in the chair, feeling your back again in the chair, looking around the room and noticing if there's anything particular where you feel calmer, or anything there where you get maybe a slight activation, annoyance, anything.
That's so interesting, yeah.
So you get to notice where, first of all, you're being present.
Yeah. Because you've got to be, because you're looking in your physical environment, right?
Yeah.
So that can help bring the presence back.
So that's initially how you would do, because your system can't be triggered if you're present. Because
that is so key. Can you just repeat that for those in the back?
So your system can't get triggered if you're being present, because we're looking around the room and there is absolutely nothing in here that is
a danger.
There is a threat to me.
Yeah.
So therefore, then once you. And again, this needs to be managed, by a professional, and it also needs to be done in a relationship.
Yeah.
For some people, that is triggering.
A relationship and being vulnerable.
This, just sitting here and trying to be present. I need to get up, I need to do something.
That's my mum.
Yeah. So then that again, that's where you work. That's where you start work.
To being present.
To notice, so the activation is being present. So then the resource becomes, can you tell me or give me an experience where you felt calm? So then you get somebody to think about an experience where they just felt calm. How do you know you feel calm? How do you experience that? So then that can be, for somebody that can be a cognitive thing, can be a sensational, can be, an emotive thing, can be a behavioural thing, it can be whatever it needs to be, but that's when you notice that you're calm. So then what you would do is, you would start off something like, can you think of a situation that happened recently where you were mildly pissed off?
I'm sure we can all connect to one of them.
So then so then it starts off like that, and then you work slowly between the activation and the resource.
So do you connect with is the goal to connect with your body physically?
So the long-term goal is to connect with all five.
Okay.
So you have a sensation, so you actually notice when your system starts to become regulated.
Yeah, okay.
And when it becomes triggered.
Because if someone's living here most of the time, which most of us are, not all the time, but a lot, the general population are living up here, aren't they?
Yeah,
and then
or
not
down there.
So it's like one or the other.
Or down there is shut down. Do you know what I mean?
Depression and then not facing things and all of that. Yeah. So getting to know you, because everyone's so different as well.
Yeah. And it, I can't really kind of talk about it in a general way because everyone's different. So say, so somebody might find sitting down really activating.
That's like so my mum, and I'm going to bring that up again because she has to do something, and that used to be me also. No shit shot, because it was also my mum's thing. I couldn't sit, and it would, and then I would use my mask of that would be, I'm bored, and I don't like to feel bored, but actually.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
So bored is around, for me, bored is a disconnection. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay. So again, the impulse is, so what do you experience in this situation that you feel that you like? So what's the impulse? Generally, it's like, I want to get away. I need to move.
I need to do something.
I'm bored. I need to get away from this. So therefore, the impulse then is the movement, isn't it? To move.
Yeah. Is that disassociation?
So that's freeze.
Okay.
So that's the freeze part. You don't have to be shut down. It's freeze. It's like what we're engaging in is too much.
So I'm going to say I'm bored, and then therefore.
So then I'm going to move away. Yeah.
That's so interesting. So one of my clients really still hates being bored, and I just kind of said, once you really pay attention to boredom, it gets very interesting. What would you recommend for her if her story is, I can't stand being bored? She's almost scared of being bored.
Yeah, because again, because she's getting triggered, and it's the thought is it's overwhelming, isn't it? So it's crossed, isn't it? I imagine, unless she was here, but I imagine it's a cross between the fear and the mobilisation to come out of it.
That's so interesting.
So that's the fear, like, what's going to happen to me? And then the fear, could be annihilation. It's so big, so much, like, to come out of it is like, do you know what? No.
I'm just going to go and do something because I'm bored.
Yeah, it's too much. Like, to sit with that, and what happens if this comes out?
So somatic experience, I've read the book The Body Keeps Score by a Dutch author. I mean, I'm almost finished. It's a lot.
Van der Kolk, isn't it? Bessel van der Kolk.
It's a lot, and that. So how does because you're almost qualified with your somatic experience,
2 more years left, yeah.
Wow, God, how long is there?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
So obviously you can't in 10 minutes tell us 3 years of research, but if I was one of your clients and you thought it was beneficial for me to have that experience, what is it? Do you put me into a meditation?
No. So basically, it's just what I've experienced. So you would start off small. You would find a resource. So somewhere where you are calm.
So is it trying to bring?
So then it's like so then you fluctuate between the two. So basically, if you think about.
So that's why you said to me, think of a time you were calm and then also pissed off. So there's a reason why you asked that.
Yeah. So what you're doing is if you think about the edge of the window of tolerance, what you're trying to do is to lean up against that. So you take somebody to where they are triggered
on purpose,
and then you work with that until it becomes
tolerable.
No, like keep pushing it until it becomes like at the point of overwhelm, and then bring them back out of it.
And then what's the point? What's the goal behind that?
To make the window of tolerance bigger. So then your system is soothed for longer. And
so life in general becomes more easeful and easier.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what I was, remember when I was earlier on when I was explaining it. So if it shrinks, the little things become big, don't they?
Yeah.
Everything becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
So by moving through your system, that then becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So then, so therefore your system doesn't become overwhelmed every time the wind changes direction.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then, you are able to lead a far more productive life where, where you're not constantly getting overwhelmed.
So it's like, sorry to put everything back to training, but it's like weight training. It's like training a muscle almost.
Yeah.
The more you do it,
Yeah.
the stronger you get in terms of your window of tolerance becomes bigger. Therefore, you're not being triggered all the time because you're practicing training that.
Yeah, that's it. And also, like, you know, it keeps firing new neurons, synapses in your brain, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? So
then you're actually rewiring your brain.
Yeah, you are.
As well.
So the things like, you know, the restaurant where you got food poisoning
from
doesn't be, you know, it's like it's a one-off experience, and your system's not going to be overwhelmed with the thought of going to that restaurant, eating that food, because that was that experience.
Gosh, wow. We best let you go. But have you got any? Oh, thank you first of all for your wisdom and your time.
Okay.
Have you got any last words that you'd like the listeners to take away?
Well, just really, like, if anyone would like to work with me,
please, yes.
My website is therealmetherapy.com in Derby, because there's another one in America.
Do you do Zoom?
Yes, I do.
Because my clients are all international.
Yeah, I do. I work on Zoom. So yeah, that if you can chuck that on there.
Of course I will. I'll put it a link up
on my Instagram account. But I guess initially start to notice impulses.
Yeah. Because without awareness we have nothing, do we?
Do you know, just start to think about, you know, if we become irritated, just be curious about it.
About what you want to, what your reaction is.
Just be like, not even that much. Just be curious about the irritation. How am I experiencing this? If there's if you feel any kind of resistance, annoyance, anything, do you know, just be curious. Like, that's the biggest tip I would give, is about start to be more curious about yourself.
Because there's so much to learn.
Yeah, and you know, what is it? What are my triggers? How am I experiencing this? And you know, what can I do to be able to soothe myself? Where are my resources? How can I soothe?
And reach out to a professional.
Yeah,
really,
absolutely, yeah. Because I mean, people talk about meditation and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? But I would be mindful about that. You know, if somebody does not meditated before, and there may potentially be some trauma there. Do you know what I mean? It could make it worse.
Yeah.
You know, if you get triggered by sitting down with your sitting down,
then you're not going to be able to meditate.
No.
Well, I say successfully, there's no successful meditation, but you need help. We all need help. The amount of coaches, therapists I've invested in to get where I am now, and I still have a long way to go. We all do. Investing in yourself is the biggest gift you can give yourself.
Yeah, I see a therapist every 2 weeks. I have 2 supervisors, so it's important.
Thank you, Gary.
You're more than welcome, mate.
Gary. Yeah. It's been amazing.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. Our
Cheers,
first
guys.
video podcast.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.